just as I was waiting, suddenly the car stopped to let me cross. And just as I started crossing the road, I turned around and looked at the car. There was no one driving that car. And just in that moment, just staring at the car, I realized that this car that was driving itself, this is the future of technology. Over the next few months, as I continued to work at Cruise, I could see the future of technology being created right before my eyes. I mean, I had never seen something so mind-blowing. So working with self-driving cars is definitely a very uniquely different experience. So now that you know why working with self-driving cars is so special, let's dive right into the webinar. So I'm going to share my screen, Seth.
Sure. Yeah, you can.
Okay. All right. So I've divided this webinar into 5 sections. In the first section, we'll talk about what are self-driving cars and how they actually work. In the next section, we'll take a look at some of the companies that are actually developing these cars. In the third section, we'll talk about what are some of the future opportunities that the self-driving car industry will create. And this is not just for engineering or tech, this is for other industries as well. We'll then explore some of the job opportunities that self-driving cars will create. And by this, I don't just mean engineering opportunities. We'll talk about opportunities beyond just tech and engineering. And finally,
Alisha,
yeah?
Out there.
Yeah, sure.
I think your screen share isn't working. Can you try that again?
Yeah, sure. Does this work now?
Yeah. No.
Okay, cool. All right. So we'll talk about some of the job opportunities that are within the self-driving car space. And I don't just mean like engineering, but also other types of opportunities. And finally, we'll look into how do you prepare yourself for such an industry? All right, so let's dive right into it. But before I start, I have a question for you. So we talk about how self-driving cars are going to take away people's job. But how many jobs do you think self-driving cars are going to create in the next 10 years? And feel free to send your answers our way, and I'm going to tell you what the right answer is in the last section of this webinar. Okay, so let's start. So we keep hearing this buzzword, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars. But what really are self-driving cars? So instead of me telling you a textbook definition of what self-driving cars are, why don't we actually see one for ourselves?
Okay, day 1 of self-driving. Are you ready? Go.
Oh, this is weird.
This is the future. Yeah, she was like, is there no one driving that car?
I knew it. I was waiting for it. Never know that there wasn't someone driving his car.
Yo, car!
Selfie.
Thank you, car.
Yeah, thank you, car.
All right, so that is basically a self-driving car. And so basically a self-driving car is any car that drives itself without a driver, but no, the brakes of the car haven't failed. It's just driving by itself. All right, so autonomous vehicles or self-driving cars are not the only form of innovation that's happening in the autonomous industry. We have what are called self-driving drones. So say, for example, if you order a package on Amazon.in, you want to order a book. So what Amazon is trying to do is it's going to package the book for you, prepare the parcel, and then a drone is going to pick it up from one of Amazon's godowns or warehouses and deliver it to your doorstep within a few hours or maybe even a few minutes. So that is Amazon's Prime Air initiative. The other kind of innovation we have is self-driving forklift. So these orange robots that you see are actual robots in Amazon's godowns right now. They help with moving around items, moving around things within the warehouse. And these robots are not controlled by any human being. They know exactly what they need to do. And in fact, so when these robots run out of battery, what they do is they go to a charging point, they plug themselves in, and they sit there and charge until, well, their battery is full, and they come back to work again. So this incredible technology is being used by Amazon right now. Then finally, we have self-driving trucks. So Otto, a company, is trying to develop self-driving trucks that can deliver goods and materials from godowns to factories to retailers to shops to wherever without the need for a driver. So this is going to revolutionize the delivery industry. Okay, so I always wondered, how did all of this start? Like, where was the start of self-driving cars? So self-driving cars started in 2004. So it actually started off as a contest organized by DARPA. DARPA is the United States Research Agency. So what DARPA said is that, okay, we are going to organize a worldwide competition. And in that competition, anyone can participate from all around the world. And what people needed to do was develop a car that can drive all the way across a desert in California. And so people were really excited, and there were a lot of people that came from all over the world. And everyone was really excited. They came with all of these new designs. But it so turned out that the car that came first barely drove 14 kilometers out of 300 kilometers. So that was a huge disappointment for everyone who was a part of this competition, because they weren't expecting these results. So DARPA said, okay, let's organize a competition again in 2005. They weren't expecting much. They thought that, okay, maybe a few cars will drive a few kilometers. But guess what? This time, 5 cars actually finished the race. And everyone was really surprised, because this was a huge improvement from 2004. And then by 2007, cars were actually following traffic rules. So Google, the company, started noticing all of these competitions, and they said that self-driving cars have advanced so much, so why don't we build our own self-driving car? So instead of making their engineers develop these cars, what Google did is they hired people from these competitions to build a car for them. So that happened in 2009. But Google kept this self-driving car project a secret for many years. So not many people knew about this. It was a very, very deep secret that was kept within Google. But then around 2013, other companies started noticing the self-driving car technology, and they realized what Google was doing. So they said, why don't we join the self-driving car race? So Uber, Tesla, GM, Ford, Mercedes, all of these companies started joining the race. But the race has actually just begun. So when I tell the story to a few people, the first question I always get is, so Alisha, when are self-driving cars going to come to India? When am I going to see a self-driving car in Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Ahmedabad? When can I drive a self-driving car from Bandra to Andheri? And the only thing that I tell people is, listen, I can, with all the bike walas and scooter walas and all the rickshaw walas cutting ahead, I can barely drive a car from Bandra to Andheri. I don't know what that poor self-driving car is going to do. But on a more serious note, Waymo launched its commercial pilot last year, which basically means that there are real people that are using Waymo self-driving cars to go to work, to come back home, to go shopping. Holidays, whatever technology, emerging technology. This is all for the engineers. ये सब engineers का काम है. मेरा क्या लेना देना, right? No. Self-driving cars are going to affect all of us. And to tell you why self-driving cars will affect you, let me introduce you to Ramesh. So this is Mr. Ramesh, and Ramesh loves driving. And so one day Ramesh decides with his family that they will go for a long drive. Okay. And so Ramesh, his wife, and his 2 kids, they all get into the car and they start driving. And they're talking, they're playing Antakshari, they're having fun. But Ramesh doesn't realize there's a divider in front of him and he meets with an accident. So whose fault was this accident? It was Ramesh's fault, right? This is what we call human error. Every year, there are 10 lakh road accidents. Out of those 10 lakh, 9 lakh road accidents are because of human error or the kind of mistakes that Ramesh made. What self-driving cars are trying to do is remove that human error so that our cars can be more safe, our roads can be more safe, and we can save a lot of lives by using self-driving cars. So if you think self-driving cars are not going to affect you, they will affect you. Okay. So, we saw this video about Waymo and the self-driving car driving by itself. So have you ever wondered, what is the magic behind self-driving cars? What is the magic behind this technology? So if you have, I have it right in front of you. So in very, very simple terms, self-driving cars have 5 key components: computer vision, sensor fusion, localization, path planning, and controls. Don't worry about all of these fancy words. I will just explain to you what they do, right? It's in very, very simple terms. So computer vision and sensor fusion help the car understand the world around it, right? So the car needs to understand, oh, okay, is there a rickshawala next to me? Is there a lady crossing in front of me? Is there a bike behind me? Is the signal red? What is happening around me, right? So computer vision and sensor fusion help the car understand that. Now, once the car knows that, okay, this is what is happening around me, the car needs to know, where in the world am I? What is my current location? Am I in Mumbai? Am I in New York? Am I in Bangalore? I'm in Hyderabad. Where am I? Right? Am I on Mahatma Gandhi Marg, Airport Road? What is my exact location? So the car uses localization through maps and GPS to understand what its current location is. So now that the car knows, okay, I am in Mumbai on Mahatma Gandhi Marg. Now the car needs to decide what route it will take to go from Mahatma Gandhi Marg to Airport Road. Okay. So imagine you are driving. How do you decide what is the best route to take? So you will say, oh, acha, wo raste pe traffic hai. That road has a lot of traffic. That road has metro construction, or so and so road is one way. It's no entry. Right? So we use all of these factors to decide that, okay, to go from Mahatma Gandhi Marg to Airport Road, I need to take XYZ route. In the same way, the car also uses path planning to decide that to go from Mahatma Gandhi Marg to Airport Road, it will take this route based on traffic, one-way street, construction, etc. So now the car knows, okay, this is my best route and this is the route I'm going to take. Now, how will the car drive on that route? So the car uses controls or the control system that help it steer the wheel, press the brake, press the clutch, change the gears, and help the car actually drive on the route that it has planned. So this was a simple summary of how a self-driving car works. It just needs 5 components, right? So it's just a 5-component high-level overview. So this is what a typical self-driving car would look like. It has sensors, it has beautiful interiors, which we will talk about in a few minutes. A lot of the self-driving cars also have batteries because we want to be more fuel efficient. We don't want to use petrol or diesel. It has a computer, which is the brain of the car. And it has a backup system in case, something goes wrong with the car. So let's take a deeper look at 2 of these components, sensors and interiors. So a self-driving car has 3 sensors. The first sensor is a LiDAR. So the image that you see on the left is an actual LiDAR image from a car that is driving through the London Bridge. So the car uses a LiDAR to create a 3D image of the world around it. And you can see how the car has beautifully created an image of the bridge as it's going through it. The second sensor that the car uses is a camera. So the cameras act like the eyes of a car. So the image on the right that you see is from the actual camera of a self-driving car. So the car can see, oh, there are people to my right. Oh, there's another car coming in front of me. Oh, there's a signal right in front of me, right? So the camera helps the car actually see the world around it. The third sensor that the car has is called a radar. So the radar helps the car figure out what is happening right around the car. Oh, is there a traffic jam around me? Oh, is there a bike cutting ahead of me? Oh, is there a lady crossing in front of me? What is happening right around me? So the car uses a LiDAR, a camera, and a radar to understand what is happening around it. All right. So let's talk about the interiors of a car. Okay, so when we buy a Honda City or when we buy an i10 or a Nano, what do we expect the car to look like, right? We expect that the car will have a steering wheel, it will have brakes, it will have clutch, and probably it will have, 2 seats in front and 3 seats a large seat at the back for 3 people, right? But a self-driving car of the future is not going to look like that. Instead, it is going to look like this. There is no steering wheel, there is no brake, no clutch, no gear. Why? Because you don't have a driver, right? So why do you need any of that? Instead, the cars will have screens. So the screens will help the passenger communicate or talk to the car. And so the passenger can tell the car, oh, I need to stop here, I need to stop there. The screens will also help the car talk to the passenger and tell the passenger, oh, I'm going to take a right turn here, I'm going to take a left turn here, I'm going to go straight here, right? And third, the screens can be used for entertainment. So if a passenger is traveling for a very, very long distance, they can maybe watch their favorite TV serial or watch their favorite movie or game, play games or whatever, check their emails. So it can be used for entertainment. All right. So with that, we complete the first section of our webinar. Now, let's take a look at some of the companies that are actually building these cars. So when we think of self-driving cars, we think of 3 or 4 companies, right? We think of a Tesla, we think of Google, we think of Uber and Waymo, right? There are very few companies in that space, correct? But there are actually at least 33 big companies that are in the self-driving car space. And there are hundreds of smaller startups and mid-sized companies within this space. So the self-driving car industry is not only very big right now, but it is booming and it is ever growing. So when a company decides that, okay, I'm going to build a self-driving car, it builds one of 2 types of cars. So the first type is a taxi or a ride-sharing service. So companies like Waymo, Lyft, Uber, Baidu are trying to build a self-driving car taxi. So what do I mean? So if you're in India, you must have used Ola or Uber or any of these services, right? So how do you use them? You pull out your app and you tell the app that, okay, I'm at so-and-so location. I want to go to so-and-so location, right? And then the Ola car comes at your doorstep, picks you up, drops you off where you need to go, and then goes on its way. Similarly, these companies are building a self-driving taxi where you can use the same app to actually call a car. The car will come, pick you up, drop you off, and then go on its way to pick up another customer, but without a driver. The second type of car that companies are building is a personal or ownership model car. So what do I mean? So a lot of people, how they buy a Ford or they buy a Honda City or an i10 or a Nano or whatever. Tesla and Mercedes maybe are trying to build a self-driving car that you can actually buy and use and keep for your own personal use. Then there is a third category of companies that are not building self-driving cars, but they're helping self-driving cars by building chips for them, building computers for them, or soft or hardware parts for them, or platforms for them, right? So basically there are a lot of companies in the self-driving car space, and not each company is actually building the car, but there are a lot of companies that are contributing to the industry in many different ways. Okay, so that brings us to the third section of our webinar, future opportunities, right? So how big do you think the self-driving car industry will be, say, by 2050? How much money do you think the self-driving car industry is going to contribute to the global economy by 2050? Any guesses, any thoughts, any ideas? Okay. This is really interesting. So the self-driving car industry is going to contribute $7 trillion per year to the global economy by 2050. And to give you a comparison, the economy of India right now is about $3 trillion. So which means that the self-driving car industry is going to contribute more than double the economy of India by 2050 per year. So it's definitely a very booming industry with a lot of scope, and this growth is going to continue for many, many years to come. But still some of us might think कि हाँ मैं तो insurance में हूँ, or I'm in education, or I'm in media or marketing, or self-driving cars are for engineers, IT professionals. मेरा क्या लेना देना, right? Self-driving cars are going to affect many other industries. So let's talk about how self-driving cars will affect you if you are in any of these industries. So entertainment, right? So if you're in entertainment, media, marketing, advertising, how are self-driving cars going to affect you and your job? So one day you decide that you want to go on a vacation with your family, right? And if you are the one who's driving the car, then you will spend most of your time honking away in the traffic, right? And a driver who drives very regularly spends about 42 hours every year in traffic. Now imagine if the driver doesn't have to drive anymore. What if that person can actually sit in the passenger seat and relax and let the car take him or her wherever they want to go? So now the driver has 42 hours every year to sit in the car and do whatever else he or she wants. So they can watch movies, ads, their favorite TV serials, right? So this creates a huge opportunity for people in the entertainment, media, and marketing industry, because now you can partner with the self-driving cars and display your content, your ads, your shows in the screens in the car. Now, what if you are in insurance, right? So if you're in insurance, you know that the higher the risk, the higher the premium, correct? Now, most of the risk of road accidents comes from human error, or the kind of mistake that Ramesh had made that we spoke about right at the start. Now, self-driving cars are trying to completely remove the human error. So that means 90% of the risk of a road accident is gone. So insurance companies won't be able to use the same policies when self-driving cars come to the market. So this is going to create a completely new market within the insurance industry. And a lot of companies have actually started working towards creating new insurances for self-driving cars. Now, this is a little bit of an obvious connection. So how does energy affect self-driving cars? Or how's the energy industry affected by self-driving cars? So if you are in the energy industry, you know that a lot of self-driving cars are going to be run on batteries. And what do batteries need? They need charging stations, correct? So if you are in the energy industry, you will see a huge boom in demand for batteries and charging stations as self-driving cars grow and they come into the market and the industry expands in general. A lot of people these days tend to go into network engineering or communications engineering. And what you will see is as self-driving cars expand and grow, there will be a lot of demand for network and communications engineers. Why? Because self-driving cars need to communicate amongst themselves. They need to talk to each other. They also need to talk to the internet. They need to talk to mobile towers. And for that, they need very, very high speed internets. So we know that 5G is going to come to the market very soon. But as self-driving cars get more advanced, we will need faster and faster internet technology and communication technology. So we need 6G, 7G, 8G. And so network engineers are going to see a lot of innovation in their jobs and a greater demand in the network engineering industry. And finally, this is the most interesting one. If you are in the food and beverage industry, self-driving cars are going to affect you. So the company that is most worried about self-driving cars is Red Bull, which is a caffeinated soda drink, right? Why should Red Bull be worried about self-driving cars, right? Red Bull, self-driving cars. What's the connection? Kya lena dena, right? Doesn't make sense, no? Listen to this. So when a driver is driving for 16 hours, 18 hours, what they do is they stop at a petrol pump and buy Red Bull, right? And most of the sales of Red Bull happen at these petrol pumps. Now, if there are no drivers, who is going to buy the Red Bull? So Red Bull is very worried that because of self-driving cars, their sales will actually go down. But now if you are in the food and beverage industry, this self-driving cars is also an opportunity for you. Because now what you can do is put your food samples in the self-driving car so that when a passenger is traveling for a very long distance, they can actually buy the food samples and you can increase your sales and get a new consumer base for the self-driving car. All right. So that brings us to the fourth section of our self-driving car. That brings us to the fourth section of our webinar, which is job opportunities. So what sort of job opportunities exist in the self-driving car space what sort of job opportunities will exist in the next few years? So remember I had asked you a question right at the start. How many jobs are self-driving cars going to create in the next 10 years? And I believe we came up with a few answers, right? But let me tell you now. Self-driving cars in the next 10 years are going to create 1 lakh new jobs. And there are only about 20,000 graduates that are actually qualified to fulfill these jobs. Now, when I say 1 lakh jobs, I don't mean just engineering jobs. I mean all sorts of professionals, especially professionals who have advanced degrees in masters and PhDs. So if you are in any form of engineering, systems engineering, mechanical engineering, machine learning engineering, software engineering, robotics engineering, you will see a huge demand for your skill and your talent in this industry. Now, what if you are a data scientist or a data analyst, right? Or if you're in HR, marketing, finance, there are also a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities for you within this industry because the data from the car needs to be analyzed and you need people who can identify trends with the car and what is happening with the car. And finally, if you are a product manager or a project manager or any form of manager, you will find that you are not only in demand in the self-driving car industry, but in the tech industry in general. So, I mean, product managers, I've just seen such a huge demand for them in the last few years in the tech industry. It's actually kind of amazing. So how do we prepare ourselves now for this sort of a job industry? So first we need to identify the skills that we require. So we need to figure out, okay, do I need to know C++, Python, machine learning, product management? What is the skill that I need to know, right? Once you have identified the skills, you need to identify what sort of courses you need to take in order to develop these skills. So Udacity, Coursera, edX, all of these companies are actually developing nano degrees in self-driving cars so that you can take these courses online without actually having to do a formal degree. And finally, get experience. There are a lot of companies out there like Aptiv, Cruise Automation, NVIDIA, that are offering internships and full-time opportunities within the self-driving car industry. If not that, get an internship with a startup or a smaller company that is working within the same technology that is used within self-driving cars. And even if not that, contribute to the open source self-driving car, which you can contribute to without even actually working, just sitting at home. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. But before I actually move into question and answers, I want you to think about something. How are self-driving cars going to affect you? And how is it going to affect your job, your industry, and your family? And how will you prepare for it? Thank you.
Oh my God, thank you, Alisha. Thank you so much. That was an amazing, amazing webinar. We had expected it, but yes, we have a lot of questions for you. The first question I think that that most people asked was, what can you explain? You showed that beautiful picture of LiDAR on the screen. Can you explain to us more about what LiDAR actually is? Alisha, can you hear me? I think she's. I think we've lost her. Give me 1 second. Just 1 second. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, can you repeat that question? I think I lost you.
Sure. So we have a question here that you showed that picture on the screen about LiDAR, and we really like that. We just want to know a little more about what LiDAR actually is and how it works.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So all of these sensors that are used by self-driving cars are use a form of signal or ray technology, by which I mean that LiDARs will send signals into the world around them. These signals will be transmitted back to the sensors of the self-driving car, and that will help the car actually develop these 3D images. Now, LiDARs are one of the big bottlenecks in developing self-driving cars because LiDAR technology is very expensive. So what a lot of companies like Cruise have done recently is that they've acquired LiDAR developing or LiDAR producing companies so that LiDARs can be built in-house. But LiDAR has typically been the bottleneck of self-driving car technology for a very, very long time.
Okay, so thank you for that. The other one is, I think Shafin asked this question: can a self-driving car be hacked, and is this an ethical hacking opportunity?
So actually, it's a very interesting question because what happened a few years ago is that Jeep, the company, so two engineers or two hackers actually hacked the Jeep or hacked the Jeep software, and they made it run in whatever way they can, or whatever way they could. So it so turned out that Cruise, after a few years, when they were building their self-driving cars, they hired these hackers so that they can hack their cars and make them more safe. So yes, there are opportunities for hacking. A lot of the self-driving car companies have security teams that specially go in and hack the cars and try to identify security vulnerabilities within the car so that the cars can be made safer. So there's definitely opportunity for ethical hacking, but of course there's always unethical ways that people do hack as well, and we need to be protected against that. Which is also why a lot of self-driving car companies will have mission control centers. So in case the car gets hacked, there is somebody who can, in some form, control the car and not let it go, in whatever direction the hacker pleases.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question is: won't this, pose a hazard, to other drivers? Won't the lack of a human factor pose a safety hazard to other drivers?
Yeah. So definitely, I do, even right now, people are quite uncomfortable with the idea of not seeing a driver in front because we're so used to seeing somebody actually driving a taxi or a car. So it will initially be pose some form of safety hazard, but I think it's more so on the driver that is driving rather than the car itself. or the self-driving car itself. Because what happens is that with self-driving cars, the companies tend to err on the side of caution. So they take extra safety measures. So a self-driving car will never break a traffic rule. If you tell a self-driving car, drive past the red signal, the car will never drive past the red signal. That's just because how the self-driving car has been developed, right? But but human beings tend to do that. So I think the problem is not so much on the side of the self-driving car, but rather on the side of human beings, where we tend to break signals more often than the self-driving car would.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have an advanced question actually from Tanisha Bhayani, who says
Yeah.
that she's looking for research papers on imbalanced data sets to train algorithms, and what sort of algorithms are used to actually train these cars.
Yeah. So that's actually a very great question. So initially, when companies develop self-driving cars, what they do is they don't tend to use machine learning or reinforcement learning. They initially just start out with hard coding some edge cases. And because reinforcement learning, deep learning, or machine learning requires a large data set. Right now, the companies haven't accumulated that kind of data where they are able to use these techniques or machine learning techniques or supervised or unsupervised learning on the car. So right now, what they're doing is they're trying to hard code certain edge cases. But as we develop more advanced technology, we will definitely be using more machine learning and reinforcement learning. That's not to say that those techniques are not used now, but they're a very small portion of the algorithms that go into self-driving cars.
That's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
data is a huge problem in general in self-driving cars. Yeah.
right. So we have Ishan, who says, every now and then we see in the newspapers about self-driving cars and about accidents around it. What are the challenges in the industry that still need to be overcome?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. There are definitely two major challenges I see in the self-driving car industry, Sean. And so the first is, like you said, safety. There are definitely most companies that make self-driving cars have safety as their topmost priority. And to answer this question, actually, let me give you an example. So as Cruise employees, we're allowed to sit in the self-driving car, right? So the first time I was going to sit in a self-driving car, I had written code for the car the whole day. And then in the evening, when I was actually going to sit in the car, the only thought that came to my mind was, oh God, I shouldn't have made a mistake in my code. Because, I would be sitting in the same car that was running my code. But then it strikes you that the quality of code, or the quality bar of code, is so high that there is no chance for error. There is no room for error, because we're constantly told that somebody's life depends on you. So your code cannot have a little bug here and there. It cannot go down. And there are a lot of backup systems in terms of car safety. Yes, there are some companies that do not necessarily follow these safety standards, but most companies have ensured that they will not launch the car until they can ensure that their cars are safe. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is that a lot of the self-driving cars still cannot run in rain and snow, which is why it seems difficult that the cars will move around anywhere other than California, San Francisco, or any of those areas, or Phoenix, Arizona. That's because self-driving cars are not accustomed to seeing running in snow conditions or rainy conditions at this point. So it's going to take some time before the cars can actually come to that point, which is known as level 5, where they can run in such extreme weather conditions. Yeah.
Right. So there's one more question. I think that's very very nice. Can a self-driving car understand urgency? So if I have to reach a destination as fast as possible, does that understand it? I mean, obviously you would not break any traffic rules, but how would that?
Yeah. So the car definitely understands urgency, but like you said, it's not going to break any rules. It's not going to break any traffic lights. It's not like कि हाँ बस मुझे जल्दी पहुंचना है तो signal तोड़ के चले जाओ. It's not like that. The car will definitely follow all the rules. But like we spoke about in path planning, so in path planning, the car doesn't only consider, oh, where is there a traffic jam or construction or one-way street. It will consider what is the fastest way to get from point A to point B, and it will optimize the route. So there are a lot of optimizations that are written in route planning algorithms, and which is why algorithms is a huge part of self-driving cars, because you need to optimize how you get from point A to point B. Otherwise, there's no point of a self-driving car, right?
Right.
Yeah, but it's not going to break any rules. So if that's what you mean by going fast.
Right. So we have a couple of students who are asking me that should they choose this as a career path, right? What sort of languages or what sort of courses should they be opting for, and what sort of things should they be learning? Should they be wanting to go into this path as a career field?
Definitely. Well, so to answer the first part of the question, should you be opting or choosing this as your career path? I think that is something you need to answer. Is if this is something that you're passionate about, or if you're not sure, get experience, do internships, contribute to the open source self-driving car, right? Figure out if this is something that you really enjoy. This is not for everyone. And just because you don't enjoy it doesn't mean that there's something wrong, right? You might enjoy other things. This is just one field of technology. The other question, the other part of the question, which is what are typical career paths, I would say, if you're looking for the more engineering roles, definitely something along the lines of mechanical engineering, systems engineering, mechatronics, robotics, software engineering, computer science. Any of these fields can actually help you get into self-driving cars. But even if you want to get into the industry, but you don't want to do the engineering side of it, a business degree is a good segue into product management, or a finance degree is a good way to work as a finance person or a marketing person in the self-driving car industry. So there are many routes to take to it, but if you want to do core engineering, then definitely go for some form of engineering degree. Yeah.
Right. I think we have a couple of questions in the group that say, what about the legal issues? If there's an accident due to a technical error, who's to be blamed? We have a question from Zara, actually.
Sarah, that's a really, really smart question. And that is something that the governments and a lot of the lawmaking agencies are actually dabbling with today. The California government had to rewrite, or is actually working to rewrite, some of the regulations, because we need to account for these mistakes, right? Who is held accountable if there is a bug in the code? Do we drag the software engineer to court? Do we drag the company to court? Who do we drag to court? So there are a lot of these ethical questions surrounding the self-driving car industry in general. For example, another ethical question that is hugely debated is that if you're in a self-driving car and the car is driving, there are 5 people in front of the car, and the brakes of the car have failed, right? So the car can turn left and kill you, or the car can turn right and kill the 5 people. What should it do, right? So most people who are not in the car will say that, oh, the car should turn left and kill the 1 person as opposed to 5 people. But when people are asked, okay, now what if you are in that car? What would you do? They would obviously opt for, killing the 5 people. So there are a lot of these ethical questions that the companies are dabbling with, but there will have to be some consensus, and the lawmakers are currently working on these questions. So unfortunately, there is no answer to that right now, but you've asked a great question, and this is exactly what the companies and governments are asking each other.
Right. So we've seen Tesla working perfectly well in San Francisco. We've seen Waymo, we've seen Google cars, but how far away is it from India? Is a lot of questions are about.
Like I said, with all the bike walas, rickshaw walas, scooter walas cutting ahead, I cannot drive. I don't know what that bichara car is going to do. But I think we're still quite far away for 3 reasons. One is the weather. Especially in cities like Mumbai, because of the rain, self-driving cars are not accustomed to running in rainy conditions or monsoon conditions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is self-driving cars need to have some form of mapping infrastructure available so that they can follow a particular route. But in this case, Google Maps has only recently come to India, and it's still work in progress. So I believe until we don't have mapping infrastructure in place, it might be a little bit difficult to get cars in India. And the third thing is also a lot of companies, it's also legal aspects or regulatory aspects. Right now, the companies are working with governments in California or Arizona or Phoenix to be able to run their cars on the roads. So I believe it's also got to do with a lot of our legal system and legal infrastructure, which might take a little bit of time to get adapted to self-driving cars.
Okay. Right. So we have a couple of other questions, which are how do you solve the mechanical problems if they require some human intervention to be solved? For example, there's something on the windshield or there's something on the camera.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So whoever asked that question, that is something that we were thinking about even while I was at cruise. So for example, what if the passenger goes to sleep in the car? Usually you have, like, another question is like, what if the passenger goes to sleep in the car, right? Usually you have a driver who's going to tell the passenger, oh, mem saab, wake up, or oh, sir ji, wake up, or whatever, right? But the car can't do that. So we've been trying to come up with workarounds. So one of the option is that the car will have charging stations, and this is known as fleet operations. So the car will have charging stations or something like the car's petrol pumps, where they will go to periodically to be cleaned, on the inside as well as on the outside. There will also probably be cameras fit within the car. So for example, if somebody messes up the car, you don't want the car driving around like that the whole day. So the car will be called back to a cleaning station or a petrol pump or some station where it can charge, be cleaned, the mechanical errors can be fixed. Usually there are backup systems, especially for clutches, brakes, gears, so that the car doesn't drive away on its own. But other than that, if there are any of these other mechanical issues, you do have like self-driving car mechanic stations that people are trying to build.
Right. I think we have another question from Nawaz, who says that we talk about self-driving cars and pre-programmed, right? They're always in pre-programmed. But does the individual have any authority to manipulate their own car's program to do something that was not recommended by the company to do? Do they have in any way, a way to change the car software, of your own good? Do you have any right over the software that's running in your own car, is what the question is.
No, for two reasons. One is that most companies are not even just self-driving car companies. Most companies, even like, for example, Google search engine, most companies will not expose the software to you, not just you as the customer, but to any party outside their own company. That's one. The second thing is, it also places a lot of burden on the customer to give them that much control. And third, it's going to be a safety hazard. So in no way will these cars actually, customers have access to the car's software so that they can change aspects of the car. Sure, you can change the lighting in the car if you want, or you can change the temperature of the car, or listen to music, or any of these consumer-facing things. But you won't be able to actually change what is in the software of the car. That would actually be crazy. I don't know what people would do with such powers.
Right. So most of these cars are going to be electric, right? So what sort of challenges does that pose? What are the ranges of these cars, and how would you deal with a car that runs out of range or stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. So right now, I think a lot of cars are still running on fuel and petrol and diesel, and that's only because we haven't reached that stage where a regular car can also run on electric batteries. So the first challenge is actually the innovation in the electric battery space, or the fuel efficient car space. And once we have reached that level with fuel efficient cars, then I think we'll be able to adapt it better to self-driving cars. But right now, most of the cars are still running on fuel and diesel. So like Waymo uses the Jaguar or a Chrysler. Cruise uses GM's cars. So a lot of the companies are still using conventional cars because you don't want two untested technologies to come together to create like a monster, right?
We have a few engineers on the group who are asking me what sort of languages are used to code on a self-driving car. This question came from Shafeen actually. So, what sort of languages did you use at Cruise, and
Yeah.
yeah, and what sort of courses do you recommend to get in the field? Like you recommended Udacity and EDX, but how do you go about that?
Yeah. So Shafeen, what language do you code in, right? Whatever language you code in, a self-driving car company inevitably uses that language. So there was Python, JavaScript, Node, C, C++, all of these languages, at least that I'm aware of, and many more, Go, that were used while I was at Cruise. And it also depends on the function that you perform within Cruise, right? Or within the self-driving car company. Say if you're on the data science side or the data analytics side, you will mostly use Python or any of these statistical or data science languages. If you are more on algorithms or computer vision side, you will most likely use C, C++. There was also the product team, which built the complete back-end infrastructure for the self-driving cars. So how the cars communicate with each other, or how the cars communicate with the internet, or any of these other things. And they used the MERN stack, which is basically JavaScript, Node, React, and Express, all of these languages and frameworks. And there was also we also had iOS and Android developers who used Android and Swift to actually develop, or Java and Swift to actually develop the app. So doesn't matter what language you use, you will find something to work on within the self-driving car industry. Also, the other thing is that if you're preparing based on languages, what I would say is prepare skills rather than languages, because languages can be learned. And this is something that's understood in general within the tech industry. Nobody is going to tell you, oh, just because you don't know C, C++, or you don't know Java, you cannot work in this company. Nobody's ever going to tell you that. So develop the skills rather than the languages.
Right. Now we have so many jobs as Uber drivers and Ola drivers and Swiggy deliverers and Uber Eats deliverers and so many current non-registered jobs, as they call it. What would happen to those people? And you said that it would create jobs more than destroy it. But what about those people who are currently driving?
Yeah. So that's definitely something that's been on people's minds. And I think that's been discussed more in the news than how many jobs self-driving cars will create, which is why I actually posed that question. So sure, Uber drivers, Ola drivers, a lot of these drivers will lose their job, but we also need to realize that this is over a span of 20, 30 years. Because for the world to be 100% self-driving cars, I don't think we're going to get there anytime before 2050. And people are already aware of that. So anytime I take an Uber and I talk to my Uber driver, or I talk to the Lyft driver, or any of these people that I've ever spoken to, they are aware of this change and they're looking for alternate careers or alternate skills that they can develop. But I think any technological change has always come at the cost of certain jobs. But that doesn't mean that those people have gone employed. That just means that they've changed their skill set in some way or the other. And given that self-driving cars are going to develop over such a long period of time, I think it's sufficient time for people to change their skill set, right? But yeah, it will affect them, and a lot of companies are aware of it. Yeah, and they're definitely working towards it, but yeah.
So I'm going to ask you an age-old question. Is it better to start a self-driving car from scratch, or is it better to integrate a self-driving system into an existing car? Or what works better in your opinion?
I don't think either of them would work well, because none of the companies have actually done either. So what most companies do is that they have their algorithm or software in place, and then they have reconstructed an existing car around that software. So a lot of the self-driving cars are actually not just custom-made, are not just factory-made cars that come out of, say, GM or Jaguar or Chrysler. They are customized for the specific needs of the self-driving car. So I don't think we can go one way or the other. You can't just take like a Ford and say, okay, today I'm going to customize the Ford to become a self-driving car. And I think neither can you go the other way around. You have to have custom software and custom hardware that both go together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what sort of opportunities do you feel this creates? Because you yourself worked at Cruise, and now you're going to work at Microsoft, and there are a few people who want to ask you, why didn't you keep going in the self-driving car company route?
So this is something I actually thought about a lot before I accepted the position at Microsoft. I think earlier on in my career, as much as I love self-driving cars, and I know I will go back to the industry at some point of time, I wanted to explore different domains and different opportunities before I settle in on one domain and say, okay, I'm a specialist in self-driving cars. I think earlier on in your career, it's important to see companies at different scales and companies that work in different domains. So Microsoft has a very different domain, very different scale from what Cruise has, and it's at a very different stage in the company life cycle. So just wanted to see that, just wanted to experience that, but it was a difficult choice, I will say.
Right. Thank you. So we have a question that asks us that what about the prices? Would an average man be able to purchase a self-driving car, and what sort of how much would the financials be affecting in this sort of area?
Yeah. So right now, definitely, say if you buy a Tesla Autopilot, if you buy a Tesla S model, which is a level 3 automation, it is expensive, I will say, but the main aim of self-driving cars is not actually to have people purchase their own, private self-driving cars, but the idea is to have a ride-sharing service. So that one, we reduce the amount of carbon dioxide and the harm to the climate that cars are causing. And the second thing is that riding in a self-driving car is going to be much cheaper than taking that yellow taxi or taking the rickshaw or taking like an Ola right now. So it will actually be more cost effective for people to take the ride sharing service. And also I think as more companies develop self-driving cars at scale, like Tesla, the costs are definitely going to come down. But right now, because there are only a few models and a few companies that are doing that, the costs are much higher. It's just the way we don't think about, how expensive is a Honda going to be, or how expensive is an i10 going to be, because they're in mass production, right? So just the same way, once it's in mass production, the costs are going to come down.
Right. So I think we have all answered almost, in general, most of the questions.
Yeah.
We have a lot of thank yous coming in, as you can see on the chat box. But yeah, so I'm just gonna wait for a good question, actually. Let me just see if I missed any. Okay, yeah. We have a question from Amin Barolia, who says, does it rely on Google Maps? And what if Google Maps takes you to a road that's actually closed? And that happens in India a lot. The Google Maps doesn't show you the exact correct route, and sometimes the route and stuff like that. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I genuinely don't trust Google Maps in India. And it's actually just not it's no one's fault, to be honest. It's just the way our roads are designed. So Google Maps is used to like beautiful grid-like streets, just the way you have in New York or something, right? But now, and most of the streets in India actually don't have names, right? So it's hard for Google Maps to actually identify those streets, correct? So in that case, Google Maps, yes, some companies do use Google Maps for self-driving cars, but car maps don't look anything like human maps, because you can't tell a car go from point A to point B. The car maps actually have layers on top of it. So just the way I showed you LiDAR images, camera images. So the car maps have multiple layers on top of it. So they don't look anything like Google Maps. But for general routing, some companies do use Google Maps, but most companies won't tell you what they use because that's still proprietary information, right?
Right. So, in your opinion, this is Aval's question actually. In your opinion, what would a world, with completely self-driving cars look like? Would we need traffic lights? Would we need, parking stations? Would we need anything like that?
Yeah, so MIT or one of these other research companies, I can't recall correctly, but they came up with a video of what future intersections would look like. So the way they envisioned it was there would be no traffic lights, there would be no signals, no nothing, and the cars would communicate with each other, stop for another car, and then once a car passes, they would go. So there would be inter-car communication, and that's how they would coordinate at the intersections. Now, how much that's going to be a reality, I don't know. When is it going to be a reality? I don't know. But that is how companies and researchers are actually envisioning the future. So no traffic lights, no signals. I know that sounds a little drastic. I think even the no steering wheel was a little drastic, but that's what people are planning for the future.
Wow. Right. So do you want to continue with some more questions?
Yeah, of course. Happy to.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people who are worried about like the question you answered about the Uber drivers and the jobs going down, and
yeah, it's a concern. It's definitely a concern.
So yeah. Okay, hold on. Let me just.
What if the intercommunications of car breaks down? Well, I mean, so Shafeen, so Shafeen actually asked this question. So, well, there's a lot of things that could actually go wrong with the car, to be honest. And that is with any software. You think about Facebook or you think about Google, right? There's a lot of things that can go down. But with self-driving cars, most of the cars have backup technology. And some of these cars even have mission control centers, which basically means there are actual human beings that are monitoring the car within a company to ensure that nothing goes drastically wrong with the car. Sorry. And to also ensure that the rider in the car is safe. So there are a lot of backup systems. There are multiple layers of safety. And most companies try to ensure that they don't launch a car unless all of these safety systems are in place. But there's definitely a lot that could go wrong.
Right. And what about the privacy issues? I mean, the employees at the self-driving car station know exactly where I am at what point in time. Is that a privacy concern that needs to be addressed?
That is, but there are, again, just a very small group of employees that actually sit in the mission control rooms. And even they do not have all the pieces of the information. So, well, think about it this way. They know where car 2456 is. They don't know exactly who's in that car. And even that data is stored in the databases, which is obviously highly protected and highly encrypted. So they might know that, so-and-so car is at so-and-so location, but they might not know, they will most likely not know all your information, all your details. That is handled by a completely different team. So no team has all the pieces of the puzzle to put together and say, Saif is driving in so-and-so car at so-and-so location.
Okay. So how far can it be a success, since it depends on third-party data? So I mean, some of these car companies, like you said, are crowdsourced. Like, so if a car goes on one route once, it sort of learns the patterns that the human is driving, and then the self-driving car can go on that route. So how far can it be crowdsourced?
It can, but I think it should not. In most companies do not. Most companies try to collect their own data for multiple reasons. One, that's because it's a huge asset for the company. And no company wants to share their biggest asset with any other company, right? That's where their revenue is. It can be outsourced, but again, each data set is specific to that very car. So you need to know, where was there a takeover? Where did a person have to take over that car? What did the car see, or what did the car see there? So it's very specific to the fleet of cars that the testing is being done on. So it's kind of difficult to have a one-size-fits-all data set that can be used on the car. So which is why California and other governments have told self-driving car companies that they need to drive a couple of million miles. I think Waymo had to drive 8 million miles before it could actually launch its commercial pilot, because they need to know that they have sufficient data to work with.
Right. So,
I see a question about self-driving car courses being available in India. Yes, edX, Udacity, MIT, Coursera, all of these are online platforms that can be accessed from anywhere. So you don't necessarily need to be in the United States to take these courses. You can do it sitting right in your bedroom at any point of time. I think Udacity is the only one that's paid, but even for Udacity, you will get a lot of scholarships that you can use towards paying for that nano degree. And they have professionals from the industry who actually teach these courses. So it's quite good.
right. So, how far does it reflect on your resume that, okay, I've done this nano degree. Does that really help, in a job opportunity?
It does. Anytime. So, well, this is also from my personal experience. Anytime I told someone or somebody saw on my resume that I worked with self-driving cars in whatever capacity, the first thing they ask you, what is it like to work in self-driving cars? And I've been asked this in every single interview or like every single person I met. In fact, there are a lot of people who said, oh, I've always wanted to meet somebody who works in the self-driving car industry. It's so cool that I met you. So irrespective of what form of self-driving car background you have, it's definitely an industry that people are very curious and excited about. Plus, the nano degrees are taught by professionals from the industry. So they are of very good quality, and you can definitely put that on your resume. I think Google offers scholarships towards nano degrees on Udacity. So that is huge. You can also say that, oh, I have a scholarship from Google to study XYZ. And even if not that, MIT has an open source, MIT has an online free self-driving car degree or course, I would say. Like, it has multiple videos. So you can say, oh, I have a self-driving car, I've done a self-driving course from MIT. That does show. Sure, you won't get all the skills, but you don't really get all the skills until you actually work in the industry, because it's such a new industry. It's not something you find in a textbook or, in any of the curriculums.
Right. So, do you expect companies to launch self-driving as well as manual-driven cars, or do you expect companies to specialize in self-driving cars and some companies to specialize in manual cars?
I think right now, maybe companies will look for their specialization and their niche, especially because this is such a booming industry and there are so many players. So companies will try and specialize. But I think in the future, a lot of companies are trying to move towards self-driving cars just because there is such a huge consumer base. And even 1% of that, or like less than 1% of that, hasn't been exploited. So they definitely want to be where the revenue is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Aval says that, do you think in the near future, normal cars like the ones we drive today would be deemed illegal?
Well, Aval, at one point of time, it was illegal to not smoke. But now it is, one of my professors actually told me that if you were in the UK in one of these schools, and if you did not smoke, you could actually be punished for that. But right now, it's the other way around. It's illegal to smoke in certain places. So it's hard to predict what the future would look like. And I'm no magician trying to predict what it's going to look like. But it may or may not, depending on what the situation is then. Say if you have smart intersections with no signals, it might be a hazard to actually have a manual car or a driver-driven car. So from that perspective, it could be illegal. But that's a fascinating question. I mean, people need to think about that.
So you mentioned the courses on Udacity and EDX and Coursera. Are there any prerequisites to, do you need to know what sort of things do you need to do in math? I think Akbar Sarani as well as Zora asked this question. What are the minimum qualifications you need to?
I think so a lot of the nano degrees or courses say that you should have some background in coding, like a little bit of coding you should be able to understand. High school math, high school probability, high school statistics. So the learning curve is not that high, but the good thing about these courses is that if they have prerequisites, they will tell you where on their website can you find courses to fulfill the prerequisites, or just brush up your skills on that. Most of these courses you should be able to pick up if you have some high school math or some high school probability statistics or something like that, and a little bit of coding. So I wouldn't say it's too much, but if you absolutely don't know any of these, you might just have to take like a short course on Coursera or edX or something to be able to ramp up.
Right. And in a way, when you said that some cars will talk to each other in an ad hoc mode, how would they talk to a manual vehicle? So if they're there.
That's why we actually have smart cities and smart cars. So a lot of a lot of other companies who are not working on self-driving cars, they're working on smart cars, where the car is connected to the internet. The cars can communicate with, say, Alexa, Cortana, Google Home. It can communicate with the fridge in your home. So most of the cars will probably in the next few years be equipped with this technology. So even if they're driver-driven cars, they should still have the infrastructure to be able to talk to self-driving cars. Because even if we retain driver-driven cars, a lot of people still are trying to move towards connected cars or these smart cars. Yeah, we just want to get smarter, right?
Right. So there are a few people who are interested in your background at Microsoft. So what would your what would you be doing there?
Well, yeah, so I'm actually a software engineer by profession, and I do see a lot of people ask me whether I'll be working in analytics or data or development. So I will be working in software engineering, and I'll be working on their artificial intelligence team, specifically Cortana, with Microsoft. So Cortana comes under the artificial intelligence department of Microsoft. So I'll be working as a software engineer for them. Yeah, if that explains it.
Yeah. Right. I think we've sort of asked it. Do you have any ones that you want to ask her?
I did see one where somebody asked that if they can take a ride in a self-driving car. Sure, come to the States, come to the US. People can actually take rides in the self-driving car. So Google has its pilot where you can actually sign up and take rides in a self-driving car. So why not just take a trip to the US?
So yeah, in the academic sense, what sort of research opportunities does it present? Self-driving cars.
Oh, a lot. So a big part of why self-driving cars have become possible is because of a lot of research that went into machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning, and cognitive neural network, CNN. And these are spaces that a lot of companies are actually investing in terms of R&D, in terms of research and development. And interestingly, most of the people who are hired by these self-driving car companies are researchers who are working towards their PhDs. So self-driving car industry in general respects people who have a lot of advanced degrees. So like PhDs or masters or any form of certification or degree. So if you are working towards your PhD and say you want to do your research in autonomous vehicle or route planning or machine learning, there is a lot of scope to do that. And you can do that while even working at a self-driving car company. So one of my colleagues at Cruise, he started working at Cruise as part of his PhD thesis, and he just ended up staying there. And he's been there ever since. And he's probably like one of the oldest employees that Cruise had. And he's still completing his PhD thesis. So you can do both at the same time.
Oh, that's amazing. So on many self-driving cars today, we see a camera on top of the car that's constantly revolving very fast. So what's that for, and what does that do? I mean, why does it evolve so fast?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the sensors. It's not a camera. The cameras are usually in front or at the back or on the sides. That's actually LiDAR. So it's trying to create like a 3D image of the world, which is why it has to keep like rotating. Yeah, they're either LiDARs or radars, like depending on how the car is designed. But those are the sensors that keep sending waves. So which is why it's important for them to keep spinning. Yeah, it's really cool actually when you see a self-driving car and go. It almost looks like a siren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would would you classify that with IoT, or would you classify that AI, or would that be a big hybrid of sort of
You mean self-driving cars?
regard to the degrees or the majors that someone that if you had an IoT major, if you had an AI major, if you had a normal just a programming or software major, how would that affect your position in the self-driving car industry?
I don't think it would matter so much. As long as, so what I've noticed with all of these companies is that there's one of two things. Either you have a PhD with a really strong specialization in something, and that's your route into getting into a self-driving car company. Or the second option is that you have your general skills in programming or software or whatever, and then you apply to these companies, and based on your potential, you are hired. And this usually happens if you're doing a bachelor's or if you're a new grad, if you're right out of college. And then there's so many positions within the self-driving car company that you can actually start off with being an app developer and then go to embedded systems, or you can start as an embedded systems developer and go to a full stack developer. So I don't think it really matters, because right now there is such a deficit in terms of talent, because like I said, there are 1 lakh jobs but only less than 20,000 people to fill it. So there's a lot of potential to move around within the company. Right. And learn skills also while you're on the job.
Right. I think we should wrap up now.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Alisha, for a wonderful webinar. I think we all loved the presentation, and we had some really great questions coming in. Thank you everyone for being here on the webinar. And if you need any questions answered, I will flash the screen where you can ask some questions, and we'll probably get back to you with some answers. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Alisha.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you also to the AKEB team, and thank you to the audience. Like, you've been great. I really enjoyed answering your questions, and thank you to Seth and the AKEB team. You guys really pulled it off.
Yeah, I think I have a wonderful team on the back end. They're constantly WhatsApp messages, and they're pretty supportive. So thank you, everyone. Once this webinar ends, I will just flash the screen where you can, if you have any further questions, you can ask them there. All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. So career.esc@gmail.com. You can, any questions related to this, you can answer that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.